but Volatile looms on the outside. Second and a neck behind. Honest Mischief finds a seam. Honest Mischief cuts the corner off the turn in contention. Top of the stretch now. Volatile's in front, and Volatile takes off. Volatile just like that. In front by 3, now by 4. Honest Mischief full out back in second. Seven Nation Army is third. Maniwa is fourth. A 16th to go. Volatile is fast. Very fast. Wins by 5 lengths on the wire.
Welcome back to more Racing Rundown on YouTube. Today we will be talking about the Grade 1 Alfred Vanderbilt Handicap at Saratoga. And I'm not alone today. Joining us is Acacia Courtney, back for the second time. She was with us when we talked about the Florida Derby back in March. So without wasting any more time, I'll introduce Acacia. Thanks for coming on the show again.
Thanks for having me. Always fun.
So, you know, obviously everyone loves Saratoga, and this is one of the first, major races in a division that's been kind of wide open. The top runner from last year, Matoli, retired. And going into this year, there wasn't really a clear leader, and there are a few horses that are looking to take that. They're looking to take that crown, but it hasn't really been necessarily established yet. But looking at these 5, and I'll run through the field right now before we get into all 5 of the horses. 1 is Lexatonian, 2 is Whitmore, 3 is Firenze Fire, 4 is Volatile, and 5 is Mind Control. So, just before we get in individually, looking at this, what would you say the implications for this race are in terms of the greater sprint division?
Oh, it's a very important race. I mean, you've seen some tremendous horses winning the Vanderbilt. Imperial Hint doing it back-to-back, just some really big performances. And it is, I think, at this time of the year, one of the most important Grade 1 sprint races. And you mentioned Matoli being retired, and it was pretty cool to see him as a Horse of the Year finalist as well. He won a remarkable 4 different Grade 1s last year and at different racetracks as well. Including one at Saratoga too. But this race could potentially be the setup for another Steve Asmussen trainee in Volatile to try and make his mark and kind of try to be the next Matoli. I think he's got a long way to go before getting there, but his last race was really impressive. And you've got some other horses that are looking to recapture form. And then you've got a horse like Whitmore who's trying to make his 4th trip to the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and it's just pretty much ageless now at the age of 7. So I think it's a fascinating race and will be a good litmus test for some of these horses.
We'll obviously get to all the horses that Acacia mentioned, but the first one, you look at the 4 horses in this race, and probably the weakest of the 5 is Lexatonian. He does have 4 wins, and he is a winner at the graded stakes level, but you look at some of his past races, and you wouldn't necessarily think that he stacks up in the company of this. His only prior Grade 1 start to this was in the Woody Stevens last year at Belmont. He was 10th in that race. He was also 10th in the Count Fleet, which had a feeling of a Grade 1 race, even though it was only a Grade 3. So would you agree with me with saying that he's probably rightfully going to be the longest shot in this race?
Yeah, he'll be the longest shot on the race, but I don't think it would be fair to completely discredit him. Yeah, he won the Chick Lang at a big price, ahead of some other horses that did have their questions. But to me, the 2019 Woody Stevens was as a whole a bit of a throwout race. So I don't put too much stock in that. I know that he was disappointing in the Count Fleet. That was off of a layoff from October to April. And prior to that in the Phoenix, he was only a nose behind Whitmore and Engage back in October before that layoff. So he has shown some races where he's run well. I don't look at him as a win candidate in here, but I think he'll be a monster price, and however you think the race flow might set up, he is maybe one to use underneath because he will be totally overlooked at the betting. But he's done some good racing and finished in some close margins near some of these horses. In fact, he even beat Mind Control in the Concern at Laurel Park last year. So I wouldn't completely throw him out in this field, though it is a short field.
And moving on to the number 2 horse, you mentioned the fact that Whitmore is ageless. This is the year the 7-year-old horses sticking around and being able to do a lot of great things. In a lot of ways, this is a throwback to bygone years of racing. But 2 have already gone on to be really impressive stakes winners this year in Zulu Alpha and Tom's d'Etat. And Whitmore started off his graded stakes campaign really well in the Count Fleet, really kind of shut me up in that race. So, Whitmore obviously very dangerous in this race. He has more or less over his career. He does have a few bad races, but by and large has been very consistent throughout his year and his career, and does actually have a win in a Grade 1 at Saratoga back in 2018. He won the Forgo. That was at 7, but Whitmore, if you look at his last few races at 6 furlongs going back since the True North, in every race that he's run at 6 furlongs, he's been in the money in all those. And since he was 8th in the True North, the one off the board finish that he had was going a mile at Aqueduct in the Cigar Mile. So Whitmore, obviously if you just look at the trending of other older horses, they've been really good. But, just looking at him, he's obviously a big threat in this race and has done some good running this year.
I actually think that his best distance is the 6 furlongs. I've always been a tremendous Whitmore fan, and hats off to Ron Moquette for doing such a good job for him, because on paper, it looks like he can be a touch inconsistent, and you mentioned some of those disappointing races, but he's also a very tricky horse. You'll maybe see him before the race that he's always, he acts up floating into the gate. He can be a bit hard to handle. He's a tricky horse, and Ron's just done a tremendous job with him, not only keeping him sound, but keeping him in great form at the top level. To be a graded stakes winner at the age of 7 is tremendous, and I love the trend that we see with some more horses staying in training a little bit later. And in fact, a horse is not even fully physically mature until the age of 5. So I like the trend of getting to see some of these horses race a little bit longer and to get a fan club as well, which Whitmore definitely has a fan club. So he's a huge player, I think, in this spot, not to mention Joel Rosario currently tied for leading rider at the meet.
The 3 horses, it's very fair to say, but he probably has the most question marks coming into this race, and it is Firenze Fire, and he does have the question marks that follow him from his past trainer, Jason Service. We've talked about, myself and my co-host on this show, a lot about the unfortunate, it's unfortunate that Firenze Fire had to be involved in situations like that, but he is coming into this race off of a win in the True North, but it's really up to the individual person is how much stock you put into that race. It was a win, but in races against similar company in the past, you'd see Firenze Fire win by a lot more than he would have in the True North. So I don't think that doesn't have any kind of talent. I would say that it's not as refined as it was in the past, but and because of that, I don't really consider Firenze Fire in a race like this against top-level company. But it's horse racing. Anything can happen. But, the question marks are very much there for Firenze Fire.
Well, sure, but I think his new trainer, Kelly Breen, has kind of figured him out a little bit now. And Kelly Breen did say yesterday after a win at Saratoga that he felt that this horse really does not handle a wet track well. Now, he has won on a wet track. He's mostly not run well on that surface. And so his race in the Carter 2 starts back, he thought that he didn't handle the surface, not to mention he was off of a layoff. It was his first time in the barn. And as you mentioned, coming from Jason Service, those horses did have to have a certain period of a layoff, and Kelly Breen had said that he was using some of his own training methods in combination with the slower type of work pattern that the previous connections had used primarily for their horses. He was treading lightly with Firenze Fire, wanting to keep things as much the same for the horse as possible. Horses are very much a creature of habit. They very much thrive on routine. And, he didn't run bad. He ran behind Vekoma, who came back to win the Met Mile as well with a triple-digit buyer, and Network Effects second in that race, too. So, it just wasn't the type of race we were used to seeing from that horse. And I actually think that last time was a big step forward in the right direction. He did beat some nice horses. He's going to have to, I think, run better today against some of these in this field, but I think this will be a good gauge for where he does stand. And the fact of the matter is that he's a very nice sprinter and a graded stakes quality horse, which I would imagine the connections are still very happy to know that they have that caliber in their barn.
The 4 horse, you talked about him as a potential heir apparent to Matoli, same trainer-jockey combination as we did have with Matoli last year. Volatile is 4 for 5, and he has been very consistent over the course of his career, and he is coming into this race off of two wins at 6 furlongs. He's only gone 6 furlongs, but in this race that's a non-issue with the distance being 6 furlongs. But in his last 2 wins, they've been by a combined 15.5 lengths. In the Aristides Stakes, he won by 8 and was 0.02 of a second off the track record. So, Volatile is a new player in this division, but is a very intriguing horse and does show to be one that has a lot of promise.
He certainly does. I mean, he certainly spots some experience versus some of the others in here. When you look at a horse like Whitmore, who's 7 and has raced 34 times, but he's a lightly raced 4-year-old. He's only run twice in his 4-year-old season. He only ran 3 times as a 3-year-old too. He didn't run at 2, so he's lightly raced. He's been handled carefully, and he's never run a bad race in his life either, which is definitely something that you like to see from a horse that has been kind of handled with care. And Steve Asmussen, obviously, remarkable with the training job that he does, and especially we've seen the success that he can have with these sprinter types. The last 2 races were so dominant, especially in the Aristides. Really, really impressed with what I saw from him. Look, he's got some nice horses to deal with in here today, but he's tactical. He, pace-wise, should be able to sit just off of the pace setters in here. Ricardo Santana has not yet won a race here at the Saratoga meet, and he's a very talented jockey, and I don't think it'll be long before we see that happen. But he's an interesting one, and just a little bit for note, people handicapping for Saturday, today, Thursday at Saratoga, the runner-up from the Aristides, Honest Mischief, is running on the cards. We'll get to see if he does flatter that winner even a little bit more.
And moving on to the last horse of the 5 is one that I've been a big fan of and have followed throughout his career, Mind Control. He is coming into this race off of a loss in the Carter, but going back early in the year and back to even into last year, he had 3 consecutive wins, including the Grade 1 Alan Jerkins at Saratoga. He won 2 Grade 3s at Aqueduct during the winter. And, he has run some poor races in his career, but, he was another horse that was in the Woody Stevens that has just kind of been that race, you have a complete question mark as to everything that happened in there. The Carter was disappointing, but, I am very encouraged by the fact that this race is at Saratoga, and his 2, I don't want to say his 2 best races, but 2 of his better wins have come at Saratoga. He's 2 for 2 there. He's also 2 for 2 at the 6 furlongs distance. So, I really liked Mind Control underneath when my co-host and I did this race on our podcast earlier this week. I just wasn't necessarily comfortable enough picking him over Volatile, but I really like Mind Control, and I really think that this is a good spot for him to run a big race.
Yeah, he's been really good at Saratoga. I thought his H. Allen Jerkins win last year was so game over Hog Creek Hustle. And to be honest, I actually think the only bad race he ran was the one last time out in Carter. I would put a line through the Breeders' Cup Juvenile that was going a mile and a 16th against Game Winner. He was cut off at the start, and he just never was really involved. It's not his distance. He didn't get to have his running style, which was being involved early in the race. In the Woody Stevens, he had a world of trouble. He stumbled at the start. He had to check. He still was beaten just a little over 4 lengths, and like we talked about, in a race that you're not sure how much stock you put into it moving forward. So I would say last time was really the only time I was really disappointed in him. It could have been a number of things. It could have been off of the layoff, the wet track, coming back against the coma. We'll see, but I'm a big fan of this horse. He just shows up every time, and Greg Sacco, he's done a lot of great things for this barn for sure, and I'm hoping he can take a step forward in here at the 6 furlongs and second off the bench.
Now, we like to look at potential pace setups, and my co-host and I both liked think that Volatile could be a horse that's up there. This is a strange instance with a Grade 1 sprint in that there's not really any consistent early speed signed on, and Volatile seems like a horse that could just kind of end up on the lead by default. Do you see it any differently than that, or do you think that Volatile is the type of horse that could end up on the lead?
Oh yeah, he absolutely could. Ricardo Santana is a aggressive jockey, and I'm sure that he wants to have him in the game early. Though sometimes you do see him races like this, especially with a shorter field, where it seems like nobody really wants to go, and then there's a case where just then everybody ends up going on the front end. I wouldn't be surprised to see Mind Control showing some more speed as well. Like I said, he has a little bit of a bad habit where a few times he's had some trouble at the gate. That happened too back in the Tom Fool, and then a non-effort last time in the Carter. But prior to that, he'd always been up forward and in the game. In fact, towards the start of his career, he was, as a 2-year-old and early in his 3-year-old season, he was kind of a speed type. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him maybe setting the pace. And it really could be a number of different scenarios depending on how things happen at the gate. I think that'll depend how Mind Control gets out of the gate, too, with that outside post.
Now, if you were to look at these 5 and kind of create a top 3, who would you say what your top 3 in this race would be?
I think Volatile has the potential to be a top 3. I think Whitmore has established himself, and I've always been a Mind Control fan. I think that he can bounce back after that poor effort, and he's usually as consistent as they come. So those are the ones that I would say are standouts on paper. But like I said, I don't think you can discredit anybody in this field. And
like she said, a very fun race. You know, short fields like this can be fun when there's a lot of really good horses. I do like that you don't write off Lexatonian. I was on his case in the Count Fleet. So, you know, we'll see what happens this weekend. But, you know, Acacia shared a lot of our opinions. So, once again, thanks for coming on, and we love to have you every time.
Of course. Thanks for everything that you do, Jack, and I love your enthusiasm, and looking forward to a great Saturday of racing.
And just for the record, I am going to go with the same top 3. I'll put Volatile on top, I'll put Mind Control second, and I'll put Whitmore third. I've gone against him enough. I'm not going to do it again this time. So thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time. Have a good one. Good luck this weekend.
And Hidden Scroll puts his head in front, but Whitmore looms large in the center of the racetrack. Here comes Whitmore outside of Hidden Scroll. Share the Upside, still very much part of this battle, and Whitmore has put his head in front. It is Whitmore now a length and a half in front of Share the Upside. Then to the inside, and Manny Waugh, he's going to do it again. Look at this race horse. Flagstaff just ran into second. It is Whitmore.